This is Nick Thompson in Louisville, Kentucky, a bankruptcy and foreclosure attorney. Quite often people come to me with a problem on their income taxes. And being a former tax prosecutor working for the tax department, we do have a lot of people who bankrupt their income taxes. One of the problems is you can't bankrupt trust taxes. If you were the individual that was the corporate officer and you were responsible for making sure that the withholding taxes or the sales taxes were turned over to the state tax department, that trust tax debt is not dischargeable in bankruptcy, but income taxes are dischargeable. First, there is a statute that sets a statute of limitations. If it's been 10 years or more since that income tax came into existence, and as long as there was no fraud in your income tax returns and you filed your returns on time, then you may have run the 10-year statute of limitations, and that income tax debt is gone. It's no longer collectible by the tax department. Even if they filed a lien against your mortgage, against the house that you own, that lien turns to sand. It goes away because it is uncollectible and it's unenforceable after 10 years. But if it's not been 10 years and you have waited 3 years after the date that that income tax return was due, and there is a special way to count that, you have to look at when was the tax return due. You would think that the income tax return was due on April 15th. That's the way everybody thinks of it. But what if April 15th fell on a Saturday? Well, then it really wasn't due until the following Monday, because we count it as the first business day after April 15th. And it may be that that Monday was actually a national holiday. There actually have been national holidays on April 15th. So you have to count 3 years after that before the taxes become bankruptable. What if you didn't file your taxes on April 15th? What if you filed an extension for October 15th? Well, now you have to count it from October 15th. And looking back at what your history was is the only way of finding this out. So that is the 3-year rule, is that you have to wait 3 years after the taxes became due. There's also a 2-year rule. The 2-year rule is you have to wait 2 years after you actually filed the tax return. Maybe that the tax return fell due on April 15th, 2015. You have to wait 3 years after that before you file your bankruptcy. But if you didn't file your tax return that year on time and you filed it 2 years later, you have to wait 2 years after you actually filed the return. If you filed it on time, that's not a problem. But not everybody does that. It may be that your house burnt down. It may be that you had a failing business and you forgot to file your tax returns. Now you have to wait that 2 years. And it is possible that the IRS may have gotten mad with you because you failed to file returns for several years or a year. And the IRS can file what's called a substitute for return. Basically, they just make up what they think your income is. If they file that substitute tax return, that substitute for return, then it may be that you're never able to bankrupt that income tax year. So you do need to file your taxes on time. The third part of this is that if there was an assessment, and to give you an example of what an assessment is, you filed your return, you owed $10,000 in taxes according to the return that you filed, but you also reached into your 401k and withdrew $5,000 out. And because you withdrew that out, you owe an extra tax. They issue an assessment, which after they issue the assessment, you have to wait 240 days. You have to wait an additional 8 months approximately in order to file. And finally, there is the fourth part of whether or not your taxes are bankruptable. The fourth part was there any fraud? Was there any effort on your part to avoid paying the tax? This can be a variety of things, such as not filing your tax returns. It may be not including items. Uh, and it is an all-inclusive item. It's not used very often, but it can appear. The way to find out whether or not your taxes are dischargeable happens to be by looking up your tax transcript. This is not your tax return. This is the record of your entire account with the IRS. You can get a copy of that by requesting it from the IRS, and you can look back through all the codes. There's a rather thick book of what the codes mean. And you can also use a program called Tax Determinator. This software allows the consumer to very quickly know whether or not you can bankrupt the income tax and the exact date that you can bankrupt it on. It's worth the extra $100 to find out, because if you miss this by one date, you do not bankrupt the tax, and you can end up being liable for thousands of dollars of tax. And there's no worse creditor that I know of than the IRS, who can do up to and including a 100% garnishment if they chose to do so by claiming that a return was fraudulent. If you have a tax problem, you're thinking about using bankruptcy to get rid of your taxes, call us in Louisville, Kentucky. There's our website, which has several articles on it. There's this video, and there's our book that talks about how to deal with the tax department and how to discharge tax debts. Give us a call. Thank you.